All right, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Springfield chapter of the Links Incorporated, I want to welcome you to tonight's conversational presentation in recognition of World AIDS Day. Tonight should prove to be a great informal and motivational discussion by our currently 3 outstanding speakers, and hopefully the 4th one will be able to join. We will entertain questions that you place in the general chat box. Link Victoria will monitor, and at intervals, we'll present the questions for our speakers to respond to. If time allows, we will open the session for others to provide comments. At this time, I want to present our speakers. First of all, hi Shanaz. We have Shanaz Reporter. She is a health educator with the Communicable Disease Division with Greene County Public Health and Clark County Combined Health District. She has worked on providing education and testing for HIV, STIs or sexually transmitted infections, and hepatitis C. Dominique Ayers is employed next, and Dominique, shout out to you, with Public Health in Dayton and Montgomery County, where she serves as the disease intervention supervisor for the Ohio Office of Health Services and Communicable Diseases. And next we have Brenda Stonebrowder. She is sister to our Link Gail. And she is noted as an Essence bestseller author. Her book, On the Up and Up, a survival guide for women living with men on the down. She has been on the Oprah show, as well as sharing her testimony and book on various TV and radio shows. At this point, I welcome all 3 of you to start this discussion. And Shanaz, if you will go ahead and begin, please.
Well, it's really good that you're taking this opportunity to remember World AIDS Day, because in the midst of COVID, it's definitely lost. And something to remember, the same population that's impacted by COVID the most, Black Americans and other minorities, were also impacted the worst by the HIV epidemic and still are. It's a shocking statistic is that of Black men who have sex with men, 50% of them, it's estimated, will get HIV at some point. So they don't get the services they need. And the stigma that still surrounds HIV is part of the fuel that leads to a lack of access to care for people getting the services they need. And also for people, we do, in Greene County, we have needle exchange programs, and Montgomery County has them too, and Dominique may be able to share more on that. And the needle exchange programs that we have are, in particular, are there in order to reduce the rate of HIV infections that could be spread from sharing needles, also hepatitis C, and syphilis too you can get from sharing a needle. But I don't know how prevalent that is. Dominique can probably speak better on that. So we have those to reduce the risk within the needle-using populations. But the interesting thing is that HIV's been around now for almost 40 years. Mm-hmm. And I think people have forgotten, and I know someone mentioned, I've kind of forgotten about HIV. And it's easy to forget about it because it's not prevalent. But the one thing I will say is if you notice on television, there's a lot of TV ads now. Do you guys notice those TV ads about taking a once-a-day pill?
Yes.
And one thing important about that is that is one of the once-a-day pill, the PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylactic, is the tool that the CDC and programming is using to try to end the HIV epidemic, which they're saying by 2025, we want to end the HIV epidemic. And they're hoping that by getting people who are at highest risk on the PrEP or pre-exposure prophylactic, that they will be able to eradicate the spread of HIV and reduce it down to, and not being transmitted anymore. So it's a medicated, a medication-based form of prevention and eradication for the HIV virus. So a lot of what we do when we do testing for HIV is we make referrals and we educate the population about pre-exposure prophylactic. And that's for someone who's sharing needles, someone who's high risk for HIV, whether it be from multiple sex partners or men who have sex with men, just based on the nature of how HIV is transmitted. It's more easily transmitted through receptive anal sex, even though it can be transmitted in other ways too, vaginal sex as well. So this is one of the goals of the Ohio Department of Health and Montgomery County Public Health, Greene County Public Health, and all the public agencies that do HIV testing and prevention. So we also have resources, a lot of online resources. People can go online and search this up, get onto the state website. OHIV is a website that is available for people to call and get answers. They can order condoms. And another effort they're trying to make is having the ability to do testing at home. Now, we don't have that yet, but with the COVID virus, it's become more and more important because we've seen people kind of not access care, and we've had to close clinics and limit clinics because of COVID. So the people that need to get in and get tested aren't necessarily getting in there. And that, was always difficult with the stigma of HIV, particularly in more rural counties, which Greene County is considered a rural county. And Clark is kind of a little suburban counties. Maybe not so much in Montgomery County, but there's still a stigma attached. So it was already hard enough to get some populations of people to come in. And now with COVID and clinics being limited, it's been really tough. So it is important to remember World AIDS Day. And it is important to remember that HIV is still here after 40 years. And all the research, people say, well, there's funding for this and people are raising money for AIDS research. But remember, a lot of the research that was put forth for HIV and AIDS is virologic research, which contributes to the ability to study other viruses like COVID. So it's groundbreaking research, but it's still 40 years and we still have an epidemic with hundreds of people still dying around the world that don't have access to medication, antiretroviral medications that will keep them from getting HIV, or also, if they have HIV, reducing their viral load to undetectable. And one of the statements that they use is U equals U, meaning undetectable is untransmittable. So if everybody who has HIV gets on medication, they get the viral load so low that the virus is not present it's still present in their body, but it's not transmittable. The viral load is not existent. So they can't transmit it. So that's one of the goals, is everyone who has HIV, get their viral load so low that it's untransmittable. And anyone who's at risk of HIV who doesn't have it could take a 1-a-day pill consisting of Truvada or Descovy, which is what the main medications are. I don't have the technical names. And so that is the goal. It's a medication-based prevention strategy. So that's the goal. So things have changed a lot. And people think, well, they've got medication for HIV now. It's not a cure, it's a treatment. So if people stop taking their medication, if they fall out of care, their viral load goes up and they can transmit the disease. And also the disease will progress from HIV to AIDS, and they could still die. And people do die around the world every day because they don't have access. And it's a shame because it's about money. I mean, it all boils down to, do we want to eradicate this disease? Do we want to stop disease and suffering? Well, we could, but the finances aren't always put where they need to be. We could have probably done it sooner, but now with this medication-based approach of the undetectable viral load for people who are positive and the prevention so that the virus can't infect people who are already negative and don't have it. Hopefully that works, but we have to get it to everyone. And the shame is that in some countries, the government has regulated the cost of those medications so they're lower. But in the United States, we have some of the most expensive medications in the world. So we're not really protecting the populations who have the least access. And it's really unfortunate. The government does as much as they can as far as the CDC and the funding that we get. And I can't really speak on that because that's not my area of expertise. But I know we could probably be doing a lot more, especially in our disparate populations and people who don't have access to care. And I think the goal also with the Affordable Care Act is that with the Affordable Care Act, everybody would have a medical provider, everyone would get an HIV test routinely because it's covered under the Affordable Care Act. But we're finding that that's not happening. It's not a magic bullet. And because of politics, the effectiveness of the Affordable Care Act hasn't been as promising as we'd like it to be because it's been politicized so much. So, any questions about that, or does anyone, Dominique, do you have anything you want to add on to that maybe, or correct me if I've made any mistakes? Because I've been out of HIV for a while. I've been doing tobacco, so I'm back in it.
No, I think everything that you covered is good. It's still relevant information. Like you said, we're 40 years in, still no cure. We're closer, not so much necessarily with the cure, but closer to how to manage it, how to prevent or reduce transmission, which is not anything that I or anyone else probably on this call would have anticipated when you first heard it, however old you were, however young you were. I can remember how old I was when it was prevalent, when it kind of resonated and I heard it and it kind of made me concerned, or regardless of what I'd say our media access at the time was which populations or which people were high risk or who should be concerned about it. Even though in my mind, I know I didn't fit those profiles, it still resonated. It made me worry or concerned because it wasn't so much about what you do, but it's what others around you were at the time or what your partners were doing. So when you take all of that and you still put it in today's time, dynamics change. But everything that was relevant 40 years ago, with the exception of treatment and care, those are the only things that have shifted. You have people who are living 35, almost 40 years with the virus. So that wasn't expected. None of that, how we navigate care, none of that was anticipated 40 years ago when this started, because people were diagnosed and they would die within, a couple of months, 4 or 5 months lifespan. Now you have people who are proving that wrong, that they're still living. I used to do education for youth, and one of the reminders that they would always remind me of was, well, what about Magic Johnson? He doesn't really have HIV. And it's like, no, that's not the case. But he, he's an advocate, and he goes out and he speaks on just how he's managed to live so long and be as healthy as he is today, living with HIV. So just that reminder alone that, yes, there's medications out there, but you still have your part. Any individual who's HIV positive has their role to play in how long and how proactive they are with taking care of themselves. And medication is a huge part of that. For PrEP, I would have never imagined that PrEP would have come along, or that we would really need PrEP at this point. But PrEP came along, and it's made a huge difference as well, that now it's a medication that helps prevent transmission, which is huge. It came out and everything comes out and it's geared toward a certain population of people. And then after it's been on the market for a year or so, 2 years, then it starts to open up to, we'll change the branding of it, that it's not just for one population, but it's for all populations. if you're considered to be high risk. But it is effective and it does work. The way that I educate people on PrEP is, Shanaz made it a good point. It's a once a day. You take it every day. I always sell it as the fact that it's like taking birth control. In order for it to be effective, you have to take it every day. You can't miss a dose. You miss a dose, then you have the risk of it not being effective any longer. And it then reduces that protection that it's giving you. So it's a buildup, and you have to be responsible. You take the medication, but you also only get it in a 3-month increment. And in that responsibility of PrEP is that when that 90 days is approaching, you have to go back into a provider and go through screening. Not only do they do STI screening, but they also do screening of your liver to make sure that you are processing the medication properly, that it isn't doing any damage. So you go through what I call that responsible phase. So in order to protect yourself, you still have a form of responsibility. And as long as you're compliant and you do what's required, then the person is allowed to get another 90-day supply. The other problem with that is, I don't know if you ladies remember, birth control was great, but birth control didn't prevent one thing from happening, and that was STD or STI. So great, you're not going to get pregnant. Great that being on PrEP, you won't get exposed to HIV, but what about the other infections that come along with having unprotected sex? So it's a twofold. Everything about it just goes back to reminding an individual that you have to be responsible. You have to remember that just because you're preventing one thing, you have to still have responsibilities to prevent against other infections. So I kind of got tapped on the wrist probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, because someone overheard me say that and weren't comfortable and didn't like that I said it. But it's reality. It's true that we're preventing one thing, but it takes responsibility out of the equation when it's like, well, HIV is off the table, but syphilis isn't. All of the other co-infections that can come along with sexual activity are still very much prevalent and still very much a risk when you aren't taking all of your precautions. So those are the big things, that yes, we have medication. We've come a long way. A partner can be virally suppressed. They're taking their medication. But what if they forget to take their medication one day? Same with that PrEP. If you're not continuing that buildup, you put your partners at risk of transmission. So great. I applaud you ladies for wanting to have this conversation because I think that is part of why we still have HIV around, is that people don't talk about it anymore. It's not on our radar. So World AIDS Day is a great reminder of why we should be having this conversation, because people are still living with HIV, still contracting HIV, and still dying from HIV. I see a few questions.
Really good point.
Yes, this is kind of a 3-part question. Where can you get testing, and is it available in the doctor's office?
So you can definitely, I encourage everyone, regardless of what they feel their risk factor is or not, that they aren't at risk at all, having a conversation with your provider and letting them know. Something that happened with me personally, and this was probably a little over 20 years ago. I remember going into, at the time, it was my GYN provider, and requesting, just HIV testing in a full panel. And my provider looked at me and said, "Why? You don't have any risks. You're monogamous. Why do you feel like you should have a test?" Because I want to. It's my right. I should be able to. So going in and having a conversation with the provider, just be prepared that you might get a little bit of pushback. But definitely they are your starting point. Why not? How I always encourage clients when I do testing, when I do education, If you're going in for routine visits, whether it be just your annual visit, annual physical, get it done. If you are going in for a mammogram, time it with something that's important to you or significant, because if you remember to go and get your mammogram, then, or your annual physical, you're going to remember, oh, I haven't had an HIV test, so I'm due to get a new one. Even if you don't have any risk factors. So talking to a provider is the most important person to go to. Hopefully you are comfortable enough with them to have that conversation. If for some reason your doctor's office doesn't want to, then definitely going to your local health department, trying to find resources on where you can get tested. And there are so many different types of, you can do it with a provider and results come back, give or take 3 days. Some providers, it might even be back the next day. The local health departments with advanced technology can give you rapid testing. So you'll have results on the spot before you leave, depending on that provider and what brand testing that they use. So that's your testing locations, how you get tested. The other thing that I would really promote, nothing against it, and I think most have gone away with doing oral swabs, but make sure that if you are being tested, that you get tested with blood samples, either having them draw your blood or even do finger sticks to run rapid screens, because they're more effective. Nothing against the oral swab, but it is more effective if you're using the actual fluid that transmits HIV.
Where do you get the PrEP?
PrEP is a little bit more tricky. It's more prevalent with your contacting a health department or a community-based organization that primarily sees patients that may be HIV positive or with prevention. I have come across local providers here in Montgomery County that provide PrEP. The only problem with them providing PrEP is that they aren't knowledgeable about all of the additional screenings and how often they should be screening a patient. So they're just providing it. You're not really getting a lot of the preventative to make sure that it's not causing damage to your body. So if you have a private provider that is willing to provide it, just make sure that they are monitoring you the way that they should, to make sure that you're not having side effects or issues related to the medication.
Are there any plans for an HIV vaccine?
That's a hard question. There is no cut and dry a yes or no. Yes, they look for ways. I've seen a lot of trials where, we have a cure, but they always end up in the same boat of not being viable or effective past a certain point. So I can't say yes 100% that we will get one, because there's a possibility we might not. But I think with PrEP, that definitely increases the hope that it can be eradicated. But the only problem with that is it's only effective as the individuals that are responsible or required to take the medication. Part of getting rid of it is individuals that are living every day with HIV do their part to make sure that they don't expose or transmit to other people. And unfortunately, in the line of work that I do, I don't see that quite often. Some people are angry at the diagnosis, and it's up for, equal distribution, that someone did it to me, so I'll do it to them. So that's probably a little more than what you were asking for. I apologize.
Okay. Oops. All right. Do you know the percentage of African Americans who have the virus?
So I was looking up, and if I go away, I apologize. I'm trying to get a little bit more. Do you have that, Shanaz?
Well, I pulled it up on the CDC when I saw the question. It says of the 7,832 new HIV diagnoses in the United States and dependent areas in 2018, because the data is always lags behind it a year or two because they have to clean the data. 42% were among adult and adolescent Blacks and African Americans, 31% were among Black African American men, and 11% were among Black or African American women. So if 42% were among adult and adolescent Blacks and African Americans only comprise about 13% of the US population, you see how it impacts the African American community very disproportionately. So even though we don't think about it anymore, it's impacting the African American community at a much higher rate, and it's not acceptable. This is not acceptable, and so we do have to keep it on the radar. We have got to keep HRV on the radar. You know, people of privilege, even in the white gay community, they're still white. They still have advantages that African Americans don't have, because we know that racism does exist. So we have to keep it on the radar. We have to ask the questions. We have to show up at meetings or bring it up. And you can still bring these questions up. You know, how come we don't have education? Or are they teaching about this in our schools and at your local church? And then put pressure on state and federal government, your health departments. Make sure that they continue to apply for funding and that these fundings aren't lost and that programming is supported. Because with COVID here and other programming happening, sometimes these programs could be at risk. And we don't want that to happen. So we have to keep it on the radar.
The other thing, I'm sorry. The other thing that I have noticed that we've gotten away from having women in HIV, new diagnosis in women, give or take 9 or 10 years ago, finally decreased, where they were like the #2 population. We're slowly starting to see an increase in women testing positive for HIV. So it kind of goes back to, you know, a partner who is not honest or forthcoming about their sexual preferences or practices. That kind of puts us in the position to even be exposed or at risk. But of course, needle use can be included. It's not excluded. But the fact that we're starting to see the numbers creep up slowly, but they are. Columbus, I'm not sure which particular county. It might be Franklin County. They had their first perinatal HIV case in, I think, 8 years or longer last month. I, as an investigator, have not had a prenatal case. I haven't heard of a prenatal case, and I know it's been at least 10 years. So the fact that you have a female who knows that they're HIV positive and gives birth, no prenatal care, and did not disclose at delivery that she was positive, and she knew she was positive. So it just, the dynamics change. So whereas we were finally out of the woods and could not worry so much that we were at risk, that's starting to change again. So again, having these conversations, and like Shana said, I can only encourage you to go to your churches. If you have school-age children, ask the question, are they getting the education? I've done education in schools, and it was extremely hard to get into the school system to educate youth. I've been in churches. It's still taboo. So the more you talk about it, the more you normalize it, make it a part of everyday conversation, the better it is to reduce the risks of transmission. because you're educating, like the question, is breast milk one of the ways that HIV is transmitted? And we'll all find out at the end of this if that's true or not. But, you know, just little things of how is HIV transmitted, that's important. So if you don't do anything else but remind yourself, have that conversation, that will make a huge impact on reducing transmission.
I was thinking at this point, Brenda, we'd like to hear from you regarding some of the comments that have been made by Shernaz and Dominique.
Yes, I'd first like to ask Shernaz, what is the percentage? Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this conversation, which is very relevant yesterday as well as today. Shernaz, could you give me the percentage again of the African-American men?
So if I'm reading this correctly, I've got the CDC website up. Of the 37,832 new HIV diagnoses in the United States in 2018, 42% were among adult and adolescent Black and African Americans. And of that, 31% of those were among Black or African American men. So the rate is 31% African American men and 11% of African American or Black women.
Right. Okay. So that's a high percentage, given that 13% was the population of women. Women, did you say?
No, of African. Oh, total in the United States, there's still such a disproportionate rate.
Right.
11% of the African Americans that have HIV, 11% are women. And wait, let me say this again. Of all new infections, 42% were among Black or African Americans, 31% among the males, and 11% among female Black or African Americans. And I think I typed it in there.
Okay, I see it. Thank you. So we have 31% African American men who are infected, which is a very high rate. So that tells me how many men out of 100 are infected? I'm sorry, that was my keyboard. How many men among the African American population are infected? So sometimes they say, well, if you look around the room and you see there's 3 men out of 100 that are infected. So then you wonder who are those men and what is their lifestyle? And a lot of times, we don't know their lifestyle. It's not prevalent. It's not blatant. It's not something that you can look at and say, well, I know what you're doing. It's hidden. And that's where I come in around about the DL phenomenon that has just has always been, but was shed a light on in the 90s and early 2000s. It's a sad thing that people will have behavior that will behave in a manner that is detrimental to people who are around them, especially the African-American woman or their partner or the person that they're having sex with. And the one problem with that is that it's always been taboo for us to even say the word sex, let alone discuss our partner's practices or if they're being monogamous in a relationship or not. And one thing that we have to know is if someone wants to lie to you, they will and they can. You can look at someone and not, like I said before, not tell what their behavior is sexually. I looked at my ex-husband, J.L. King, for 10 years, 2 years while we were courting and 8 years of our marriage, and never knew until that 8th year what was going on. I knew something was amiss, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And my sister can tell you, she had no clue either. My sister is Gail Grant, in case I just want to say that. Gail is my sister. And I don't think Shernaz and Mary, we all work together. I don't think they didn't know either. If you had met my husband, you would say, oh, at that time, he looked very macho, like there was nothing hidden. He was straightforward, had great personality. You know, everyone just took to him And he was a great guy, and still is a great guy. And he's greater now because he's come forth and dispelled the lie that he has been telling all these years, and encourages others to not lie to their partner. He will tell you that he has lost many friends through HIV/AIDS. We separated at the time where this became prevalent, early in the 80s, early 80s. And it's just by the grace of God that I sit here before you, able to tell my story and not be on the other side of the HIV/AIDS, I call it epidemic, from where we started. I do better when people ask me questions, because there's such a broad area, and I can go on and on with this. So I'll open it up to questions once I share my story, a little more of my story. So if anyone wants to break in and ask a question, that would be fine. And we want to lighten up this conversation and get a little transparent, and know that, everyone is susceptible to any one of those diseases that are out there, COVID and anything. And the sad part about it is that there are stigmas that are attached to any communicable disease. You want to steer clear, you want to put up, fingers, tell people to stay away from you, and not even be social. A lot of women came to me and said, well, can you look at my friend, my husband, my boyfriend, and tell me if he's gay? They would take me to a corner and ask me, and I said, no, I can't do that, because I can't look at someone just like you can't look at someone and tell whether or not they're on the down low or whether or not they're gay. If they tell you, if they're honest, then you know. So with women now, with the disproportionate rate of 13% African American women, that's still scary. That's 13% too many. And some of that percentage is because of the down low behavior is still there. It still happens. There are still people who will not disclose to you what their preference is. There are still people who are married in a heterosexual relationship who are still hiding the fact that they are practicing in down low behavior. You've said, the other ladies have said that we don't talk about it. It's not out there in the public as it was, but that doesn't mean that it went away. So we all have to be careful in our what we do. And I think Mary had said to me about, or someone has said to me about women who are in the dating scene, or starting to, older women are starting to, not starting to, but are still in the dating scene, and they feel like, oh, it's not going to affect me because I'm older, I'm wiser, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I know people. No, you don't. You have to ask the pertinent questions, exact questions. You have to be very specific when you're having a conversation with your friend, your partner, whoever you are engaging in a relationship with, and deciding that you're going to take it to another level and have sex with them. You have to be specific in your questions. You can't say, well, do you like men if it's a man, or do you like women? It goes both ways. You need to ask those hard questions. I see questions coming up over here. Maybe, no, those are the old.
There's just some statistics.
Okay. So does anyone have any comment, any questions for me? I am transparent to a certain extent. I am transparent. And if I don't want to answer it, I don't know the answer, I won't, I just, wherever a lot of people want to know, well, how did you find out? Personally, for me, the way I found out was through just watching and investigating, and what I felt in my intuition. I'm like, something isn't right in this relationship. I don't know what it is, but I'm not being treated right. I don't feel right. I felt like I was being neglected sexually and emotionally. And it even got to the point where there was some abuse, emotional abuse. It never got physical, but there was some emotional abuse. Sometimes a man on the down low will try to put you down so that you feel less of a person. That's one reason why I like this statement, fearfully and wonderfully made. They'll try to connect with a woman who has low self-esteem, or one who is what I call thirsty for a relationship, and will just take anything and not be careful about who they choose to enter into their life. So with that, I want to just ask: are there any questions of me that I can answer for you? A lot of you know my story.
How did you reconcile with your ex-husband, and how did you heal from that? And how would you talk to young people today about, not to stigmatize being bisexual or gay, but how would you talk to young people in a healthy way so that they know what to ask or how to talk to each other to try to get potential partners or partners to be open and honest about their sexuality? And how do you feel, what could we say or do to get people to share about that and to change some of this about sexuality?
Well, first of all, we need to educate. We need to educate them and have to decide on at what level, at what age should that education begin. A lot of times I like to say it's when they start asking the questions. And sometimes that's too late because someone has told them the wrong answer before they come to you. And you have to have an open relationship with young people. If I always told my children, if you can't come to me, find someone else that you can talk to who was responsible, not necessarily an adult even. That's a whole nother story, right? A whole nother level, a whole nother subject matter as far as trusting adults, because some adults cannot be trusted. So it has to be someone that they know that their parent or guardian they trust to come to them and to talk to them about intimate things. As far as the healing is concerned.
Was that Dr. Fuller that came on?
Yes, Dr. Aveda Fuller has come on to the call.
Okay. Well, I can go ahead and Dr. Fuller just do a quick, she is our other guest who's just arrived, Dr. Aveda Fuller, and she's an associate professor of microbiology immunology at the University of Michigan Medical School. She specializes in research of herpes simplex virus as well as HIV and AIDS. And with her presentation, she may be able to answer a couple of questions we've had regarding mutation and vaccine.
All right, good evening. You can hear me and see me?
Yes.
All right, so sorry that I couldn't be with you for the full time. And I just learned about this recently, but there was another thing appointed for tonight. But I just wanted to say hello at least and open the door to engage with you and perhaps plan something later for more time. I actually do teach a course at Payne Seminary about what people should know about HIV/AIDS. So if you have questions that I can answer, I also work with a program called an intervention called Trusted Messenger Intervention that we do in communities of Zambia to help people understand the science behind HIV/AIDS, why the antivirals work, why this is a non-discriminatory virus, and why it can be stopped, what HEART is and what the numbers are, and that people have the power to stop it. So if you had questions, that might be the best use of our time, if there were questions asked earlier that I could answer or try to answer.
There was a question about a vaccine, and is there any, let me look back here. Are there any plans for an HIV vaccine? Someone had a question about that, and also a question about mutation of the virus over the past 40 years.
Okay, so let me answer the second one first. It's easier. HIV is the kind of virus that has like our genetic genes, our DNA, which is pretty stable. The HIV virus natural genome is an RNA. It does this crazy thing where it goes backwards to make DNA. So that's why it's called a retrovirus. And that DNA can integrate into our host chromosomes and just sit there inevitably, right? Or it can be active. But the point I want to make is the RNA that makes up the genetic material of the virus changes often. So the viruses that are, if I were HIV positive, the viruses in my body now, a year from now or 6 months from now, would be slightly different than they are now, which is why with the antiretroviral drugs, we have to keep changing them, or at least keep aware of whether they're working or not, because the virus has the ability to mutate around those. And so that's why we give 3 at a time, because you can imagine a virus might mutate around one of them, but it's very unlikely that it's going to have enough mutations to get it around 3 at a time. And so that's the basis of the highly active antiretroviral therapy that is now used both for people who are positive and people who are their partners who they may be negative in the PrEP, the pre-exposure prophylaxis. So yes, this virus changes, and that's been one of its difficult ways of being controlled, and why we have now the therapy that's a multi-drug therapy. The question about vaccines, that's more complicated because, first of all, a vaccine usually works to keep you from getting infected. And right now, because the virus changes so, the regions we would make antibody to or make the immune system see also change. And the regions that don't change, we can't seem to make good antibody to. So far, there's not, to my knowledge, been a highly effective vaccine candidate even to come to FDA, much less get approved. So the prevention, just like really with COVID right now, the prevention is the public health means of preventing or encountering the virus. And that's what we have to do with HIV. That's why the heart and the PrEP and all those things are designed to reduce the level of circulating virus, which will ultimately, hopefully, make it to a point that it won't be so contagious, because you people will have it and those people will know they have it and be protective to not spread it. So to my knowledge, there's no great idea of a vaccine candidate. There are lots of people studying what regions might be constant and have to stay constant, but to my knowledge, there's nothing in the pipeline that's even in clinical trials yet. Let me change that, or that's been effective enough to get to the phase 3, which is a very, very large scale clinical trials. Okay, sorry. There's another question.
I've been hearing about, what about a vaccine? What about a cure and a vaccine? And we have not seen it after years and years of research. It's kind of frustrating, and people wonder, well, how come they don't have a vaccine like they do for COVID? They were able to do this with COVID so quickly.
Yeah, they're different. They're very different. COVID is let me go back. HIV has both the RNA form and then it makes this DNA form that looks just like our DNA. And once it puts that into the body, into your DNA, our own cells actually are harboring the virus inside the genetic material. And even when we get someone down to a level of being undetectable for HIV in the blood, we can't see it. And some people say, oh, I'm cured. If they come off the drugs, if they come off the heart therapy, what happens is there are sites that the virus is what we call reservoirs in the body, where the virus is stored inside our own DNA, so the immune system can't see it because it's in the cells. Once you get away the pressures to keep it in those cells, then it begins to reproduce and it re-emerges. So this is a virus that has all kinds of tricks or all kinds of, and really the virus isn't tricky, it's just trying to survive. It's just done what it needs to in order to keep reproducing, which is what all living things have to do. So it can change its outer surface, it can hide away in cells. It can be in you without your knowing it for a long time. It can take out your immune system. It's really a pretty interesting virus. And the most weak part about it is its ability to survive outside the body, which is why it can only be transmitted in the 4 body fluids that we teach our people in breast milk, which we try to eliminate by having any mother who's positive to be on antiretrovirals, semen, vaginal fluid, and blood. And so if you avoid all those, direct contact with any of those, then you never get HIV transmitted. But of course, we're sexual creatures by our making, and so avoiding semen and vaginal fluid takes a little bit of effort. But it can be done, and it can be done safely if you know that. I know you guys probably know the ABCs: abstinence from engaging in sexual intercourse, which is possible, not likely, but possible. B, being faithful to one person who you know is negative and they're negative, and you stay faithful to each other, then there's no way HIV enters your relationship if you're not exposed to IV needles or something. And then C, if you're not going to do A and B, then always safely using condoms for every sexual interaction and avoiding IV drugs. So those things will allow you to never come in contact with those 4 body fluids that can protect HIV. Otherwise, HIV is very weak. It dries out very easily. And that's why it has to be in those thick body fluids in order to survive outside of a human. But that's its most vulnerable place. Once it gets in the body, it has all kinds of ways to survive. It's what we call a latent or persistent virus. It's around, it sticks around. It has the ability to remain in your body, hidden away from the immune system. COVID, well, we don't know about COVID. I was going to say COVID doesn't do that, but there's so much we don't know about COVID. From its initial presentation, we did not think COVID did that, but because there's now long haulers, people who are ill long after they've been infected, the question is the virus still there, or is this just damage to the systems while the virus was there? We don't know the answer yet. So I was going to say COVID doesn't do that, but I can't say that because I don't know.
And you've been studying COVID too, correct?
Excuse me?
You've been studying COVID also?
Well, because I teach about all these things, I don't do research with COVID, but because I teach it, I have lots of colleagues now who are switching over to do things with COVID. The thing is, nobody had been studying COVID. It just emerged as a brand new human virus last fall about this time. And so we've learned a lot in the last 10 months, 11 months, but there's still so much that we don't know. So much. And the only thing we have for COVID right now is prevention, which you keep hearing about. And, you know, we are not doing that very well, particularly here in the U.S.
It's a shame when public health issues become political issues.
Absolutely. And that, unfortunately, was a setback for this. But I hope we're moving in the right direction. But it really is up to each of you. I think I sent the video about what you should COVID conversations. Did I send that to you?
Yes,
I don't know if you
I shared it with Mary Moore, and I think she could share it with the Links group too at some point so they can understand it. It's a very good description. I mean, it was very clear understanding of COVID.
Yes, it's called COVID-19 Conversations, Family, Friends, and Workspaces. And what we do is essentially lay out what happens, where this virus came from, what it does to the body, and then what we do to prevent it in a way that I've been told is the clearest anybody they got it after that. I mean, so I would highly recommend that you get it and look at it. And then if you have questions, we can set up something to address your group again or whoever you want. But the more you know, the better equipped you are. It was actually done for about 5 groups before Thanksgiving to try to reduce the Thanksgiving travel and holiday travel, not just for Thanksgiving, but holiday as well. This is not the year to get together with anybody. We need to stay in our homes.
Thank you, ladies. I'm going to kind of steer the conversation right back to AIDS. Brenda, this question is for you. Did you have the fear of having AIDS? And then once you found out your results, how did you move on with other relationships? What was that process? for you? You're on mute, Brenda.
I did have a fear. A real fear. And fortunately, my relationship, if I had continued my relationship, I think that I probably would have been infected. However, our relationship actually stopped in like 1980. Our physical relationship stopped in 1980, 81. So, but that fear was real. And I encourage other people to, check their relationships, have the conversation with their partner, agree to get tested together.
Mm-hmm.
And when you first start a relationship, I think that's the first thing you should do.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are on their second time around, or even their first time around with a serious relationship, even at an older age.
First time around.
Pardon me?
Or they could be on their third or fourth time.
Or their fourth time around, exactly. And if that's the case, you really need to be proactive in your testing practices and in your conversation with your partner to be honest. First, when you first engage in a relationship, that should be a person that you can have conversations with. I'm going to ask you the second part of your question that you had for me.
Yes.
What is the second part of the question?
Second part is how did you move on when you were started dating again?
Well, when I started dating again, I actually became promiscuous. And that wasn't a good thing. So then that, you enter into another phase of needing to be honest and open and careful and to get tested and to go through all the phases. However, the information didn't come forth until later on, as far as the CDC and them, giving us the information. To move on emotionally, it was very difficult. I didn't at a point, I just cut it off. I'm like, I just don't want to see anybody, ever again. I don't want anybody to look my way as far as a man was concerned. It was difficult to trust. But the way I learned how to trust again, and I'll refer to my present husband, the way I learned how to trust again was through my relationship with God. And the way that I learned how to be honest was also with my relationship with God. The way I learned how to forgive was through my relationship with God. Because you have to have, forgiveness is not easy. Vindictive is easier. To be vindictive is easier. And to have animosity seems like it's easier. You're quick to do that rather than just to forgive, move on, and continue with your life. So it was difficult. I'm not going to say that it wasn't. It was very difficult. It changed who I was. But then the only way that I would have gotten through this, both physically and mentally, for me, I have a strong belief in Jesus Christ, and that's the only way I got through this. It was just by the grace of God. That's the only way I can tell you that I could get through, because it was my Savior. And actually, after forgiving, JL and I actually wrote a book together, and it's called The X Factor: Finding Freedom to Heal, Forgive, and Love Again. It's this book. And you notice my ex, my present husband, and myself are all three on the cover, because it takes everyone in that relationship to make that happen, that healing happen, the freedom to move on. And it takes God in that relationship too, the freedom to move on, to heal and forgive. It wasn't easy, and that's okay, because I realize now, after all of the people that I've encountered, that the openness of our story has helped to prevent It's helped to prevent people from engaging in unhealthy relationships, unhealthy behavior. And it's helped people to understand that it's healthier to forgive and move on. So I feel like my life has been used by God to promote this, to promote, just to get the message out there, to be a messenger and to be an example. So that's where I stand right now, is thankful, grateful. And like I said, if not for the grace of God and coming to myself and understanding that, and for JL to come to himself and understand that the behavior was not good for society, because when you engage in this behavior, it's just like COVID. It moves on to the next person, the next person, the next person, and it compounds if it's not put in check.
Was
Can I ask a question?
The name
that was
The name of the book, Brenda.
Pardon me?
Can you tell us
Your book again?
Okay. Well, the first one was on the up and up.
Hold it still. Hold it still.
And the next one was Diary of a Cover Girl. There's a lot of factors that are involved with people's behavior, and even the choices that we make in our partners. And I talk about some of that in here, and talk about my life more personally here. And then the X Factor. Oh, this one was Diary of a Cover Girl, the other one. And this one, the X Factor.
okay. Thank you.
All right. Victoria, have we gotten all questions through? Because I think at this point, we might want to conclude our conversation, but I want to make sure all questions were addressed.
I don't know that we got all the questions asked and answered. I think we didn't got all the questions asked, but I do think for the most part, we got all the questions answered.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, well, at this point, your time for the evening is valuable. I know you want to get back to doing other things, but I want to thank, and as the links, we really want to thank our four actually, with wonderful presentation and conversation. I think we learned a lot. And I think at this point, we have, Sherelle, our post-evaluation, correct?
Yes, ma'am, our post-poll.
Okay.
All right, ladies, we're going to relaunch. Oh, wait. I'm all excited to do the old one. You don't need that. Let's do the post-poll.
While you're pulling that up, someone did talk about false information and stigma. And what are some of the false information being translated? I don't know if I understand that.
There's actually a lot of it out there. That's another whole conversation, but I know Brenda has probably heard a bunch of this, but that you can't get HIV in certain ways, or just a whole bunch of things, or that it's only for certain people, or it's just a virus looking for a body to reproduce in, and if you get exposed, it's going to try to reproduce itself. It's just what viruses do.
Yeah.
All right, ladies.
Okay.
Post-poll. Scroll down. There are 5 questions. And you should be able to click on and submit. And I believe we got the answer to one of the questions. I know for sure about the breast milk. Dr. Fuller let us know about that one. Hot dog milk. Oh, look, we've got 100%. We do. Okay. Well, we only had 2 people finished yet.
Oh, that's good. 100% for 2 people. That's real good.
All right.
Well,
Go ahead.
while we're waiting, could I ask Brenda a question that she may not want to answer if it's too personal?
Sure.
Are you actually doing heart or PrEP? I don't know
No,
if she heard. No?
no.
Okay. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
we got 17 responses. 18. Oh, you ladies are going much faster too. Let's see, I'll just give it a few more seconds here. We get to 2 minutes and then I'll just cut it off in the interest of time. And we'll review those answers. All right, 10. 5.
While we're waiting, Dr. Fuller, why do you think why would you ask Brenda, is she doing PrEP? Why would that be a question for her?
Because the uptake of the antivirals that can help keep the virus load down, so people's CD4 level is good, and they're less likely to, one, be sick at all, and two, less likely to transmit to a partner. I mean, there are people who take PrEP and heart that are able to have children who are HIV negative. And so she's really healthy, or so it seems from the very moment. So I didn't know if she was taking these or not. It's all God.
All right.
It's God. And I have another testimony as far as my health is concerned too. Being diagnosed with MS. You know, as I said, God has protected me. And I was diagnosed at 35 with MS. And I had my neurologist told me at the last round of testing and everything that you do, that he said, I diagnosed you with MS. I said, yes, you did. He said, I see nothing. I said, well, you know, doctor, that's God. I said, God healed me. God, I didn't tell him God healed me. I said, that's God. He said, that's what you believe. that's what it is. So, and that was after forgiving the person who broke up our marriage, who was my ex-husband's boyfriend at the time. I had an encounter with him at church, and the Holy Spirit, I'm going to give my testimony. That's the only place I can go with this. I forgave his boyfriend in a church service. I thought, I was saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost, fire baptized, and I was okay. But I had bitterness in my heart. And bitterness, that's another thing, doctor, that we need to study. That bitterness actually can change the makeup of your brain, the makeup of and add to illnesses in your body because of that stress. That level, you can probably better explain it than me, doctor. The level of that stress going up and down, affecting our bodies, and not being able to ward off certain things or heal your body, heal itself. But I forgave him. I went back to see my neurologist, and that's when he told me he saw nothing there. Now, I have a sister-in-law who says, well, you didn't have it in the first place. You were misdiagnosed. But,
With the MS, multiple sclerosis?
With the multiple sclerosis, yes. So, and that was when I was 35, and I'm not ashamed of my age. I am 66 years old. So, yeah. Now, I know doctor is probably saying now some of these things lie dormant and they'll come back. Okay, so we'll talk about that at another time. Hey, I speak life out of my mouth. I speak life. So, we have to be whole, physically, mentally, and spiritually. We have to be whole in all areas of our life.
What you may not know is this doctor, this virologist is also a minister and former pastor. So I got you. I know God can do anything. That's just not how he typically does it. But that's hey, that you're a living witness to that.
Yes, and that's why I'm not afraid to come out and speak about it and didn't keep it to myself, because if God did it for me, he can do it for someone else. And he gives other people hope, and that it's a mandate of me. When anyone asks me to come out and speak about it and ask me about my testimony, I'm not ashamed to say. Thank you, Doctor. Praise God.
We really appreciate, Brenda, you sharing. We really do. And you've been a motivation, I think, to many of us.
Thank you.
So, ladies, it looks like our poll, the questions were, we got it 100%. World AIDS Day is, in fact, on this December 1st today. So we did all right with that. I tricked some of you with the HIV. It stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. You all should have seen me trying to mess these words up here last night. HIV is transmitted in breast milk. That is true. We got 100% for that one. And we didn't get into the specific percentage, but the U.S. Department of Health does have a goal of reducing the new HIV infections by 75% by 2025 and 9% actually by 2030.
Okay.
I saw some of the literature that Ms. Sharnaw shared with us earlier. And the majority of us got 5 right. Only certain populations are susceptible to HIV and AIDS. Everybody is susceptible. So thank you all for doing my poll. We appreciate you. Thank you, our Mistress of Ceremonies, Letha. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you. And it looks like we've got some more conversations to have just based off of what we did here tonight. Right? We can really add on to that.
Yes.
Can I slip in here too? I just wanted to say thank you, especially Sharnaw. She really helped pull this program together. And for someone who had cold feet, I kind of doubt that. So you all did beautifully.
I do not like speaking in public.
Thank you, Brenda and Dr. Fuller, for you joining us. This has been a wonderful program. A wonderful program.
Real.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for the invitation. And Miss Reporter does this all the time. She's really great. She just underestimates her own impact. So
Did you tape this? Dr.
Yes.
Edwin, did you tape this?
Yes, it is being recorded. I did tape it.
Oh.
Now I don't know how to
I should
edit it.
put lipstick on this.
See, that's what, look. All right, ladies, I'm going to play a little Going Home or Out of This New music for you. I think. Everybody have a fantastic evening.
Good night.